Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this lunch and learn about solar for condominiums. My name's Laureen Von Clan, and I'm co-chair of Climate Action Santa Monica, a local organization focused on educating and empowering people to take action for climate. As I'm sure you all know, rooftop solar and battery storage are great potential solutions for addressing the climate crisis. And that's in part why you're here, I imagine, apart from all the other benefits that you can get from solar. So thank you for being here. Before we start, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that with the pandemic and the important movement these days to undo systemic racism, a lot of people are experiencing difficult and emotional times. And though we're talking about solar today, we have not forgotten that these important issues are foremost in many people's lives, and we're thinking about them. And we are doing what we can, many of us, to address these issues. So thank you for understanding that. So let's get started. Our goal today is to help you better understand what it takes to install solar power on condominiums. The key message here is that it can be done, and thanks to new laws, it's gotten easier. We hope some of you will be inspired to install solar on your condo. It will not work for every one of you. Some sites are simply not well suited for solar, but we will give you tools to figure that out and whether or not your home is well suited to this, and we can also help you get it installed. That's a key part of this initiative. I'm pleased to let you know that Sunrun, a national residential solar provider, will be providing technical support to this effort to help get off. Our first speaker today is Drew Johnstone. Drew is Senior Sustainability Analyst for the City of Santa Monica Office of Sustainability and Environment. He has 10 years experience managing sustainability projects, and among his many projects, he administers the Solar Santa Monica program, which provides technical expertise to Santa Monica staff and the community on energy upgrades, solar, battery storage, and more. We will also have in this conversation Paul DeSantis. Paul is a real estate attorney with 30 years experience. His practice has an emphasis on condominiums, and he has had over 300 condo project clients. He's served on the board of Community Corporation, an affordable housing developer here in Santa Monica, for 25 years and has been its vice chair. Paul will address in a nutshell some of the legal changes that have opened up the doors for solar power on condominiums. Jibadi Sandiford and Michael Ware from EcoMotion, an environmental consulting firm that knows Santa Monica's and solar power very well, will also be on the call. And Jibadi will be helping us with the chat and Q&A. So please put any questions that you have into the chat and we will address them. With that, I turn the screen over to Drew Johnstone. Thanks, Drew.
Thanks, Laureen. Hi, folks. My name is Drew Johnstone with the City of Santa Monica. And I just want to say, no matter what your reasons are for going solar, I just want to thank you for spending your lunch hour with us to learn about a technology that is good for the environment, it's supported by our community, and spurs the green economy. So thank you. Solar technology is the go-to renewable energy technology here in Santa Monica. We've seen great success. We have over 1,000 systems installed in our city. And I'm proud to say 2019 was a banner year for installations. We had over 100. Many single-family homes, multifamily buildings, and 2 large offices went solar last year. Many of these new installations can be attributed to the fact that solar is actually required on all new construction in Santa Monica, dating back to 2016. And starting this year, solar is a requirement for all new homes in the state of California. It just makes sense. It's cost effective. That's the reasons why we can require it in new construction. And it's also cost effective to retrofit existing buildings, even condos. We'll get into that today. So here's our agenda for the next about 20 minutes. And I'm going to start with some solar basics, just to ensure everyone's sort of on the even playing field from the get-go. Learn about some terminology, the key components of a solar system, how you interact with the utility company, and what your rates might look like before and after solar, and also get into a sample uh, system and what it might cost and the incentives available. So it's important to know we're talking about solar photovoltaics, which produce electricity. So there are two or three terms I want you to really lock down. And one is watts, which is a unit of power. It's what your electronic appliances use in your home to function. For example, an 8-watt LED light bulb or a 50-inch TV might use 100 watts. Solar panels are also rated in watts. A typical solar panel installed on a rooftop these days is about 350 watts. And a typical condo might require 6 or 7 of these solar panels wired together to form about a 2,000 watt system. And when we're talking about watts, greater than 1,000 watts, we refer to them as kilowatts, 1,000 watts. Now, when you use your electronic appliances or when your solar is generating, it's doing that over time. So that's where the term kilowatt hours comes into play. Kilowatt hours you might recognize on your utility bill because that's how the utility charges customers for electricity. That's 1 kilowatt of demand over the course of 1 hour. So your meter is tracking how many kilowatt hours you use over the course of the month, and that is sent to you in your monthly bill. So with respect to the key components of a solar system, I want to start with racking. Now there's racking for all different types of roof types. What they have in common is that they're anchored to the building's structural framing, and then racking is secured to anchors. Solar panels are installed on this racking. As I mentioned, a number of solar panels will be required for each unit of your condo. And these solar panels produce what's called a DC current or direct current. But our homes and our electricity grid rely on alternating current. So the next piece of equipment that's required on a solar system is an inverter. Now, typically, inverters can be very small and mounted on the backside of every solar panel. It makes for a really easy installation. But there's also central or string inverters like the one pictured here, which are mounted on a roof or near the electric panel of the building. Another feature of these inverters is that they're often web-enabled, allowing you to monitor your system in real time. You can see on the bottom of this slide a simple flow chart of how electricity travels through each of these components. So from the solar panel, it gets converted to AC power, which is used in your building. It's interconnected to your electric panel. And then any excess power that your system might generate can go back into the grid. And that's all tracked with the digital meter that's installed on your property. So it tracks energy sent back in the grid. It also tracks energy that you take from the grid. And that's exactly why solar reduces your bill. Solar system on your roof generates power and use that in your building. But if you're not home and the system's producing during the day, it gets sent back into the grid for credits. Now, this system is called net metering. This is an important term for you to learn if you're going to be a solar customer. This is a billing mechanism set up by our utility companies that allows you to receive those credits from your solar, and at the end of the month, you'll get a bill only for the net consumption, what you've drawn from the grid, minus what you produced. And there's two different types of net metering structures that we'll get into later. There's a standard net metering if your solar system's connected to your unit. There's also virtual net metering, which we'll get into, that is specific to multifamily buildings. Now, if you've ever looked at your Southern California Edison bill, you're likely charged by kilowatt hour in tiers. The billing structure is set up so that the first 300 kilowatt hours are one rate, the next 300 kilowatt hours are more expensive, and the 600 kilowatt hours and up is even more expensive. After you install solar, the utility companies require you to change your rate to what's called a time of use rate. And what you'd see on your bill are some new line items for net generation. This is how much energy your system's produced above and beyond what you've pulled from the grid. And they're set up in different time periods, on peak and off peak, and mid peak or super off peak. Oh, one other point about the new bill is that, again, if you're a net consumer, you'll see a positive number at the bottom. If you're a net generator, that would be a negative number, meaning that your system produced more than you used that month. Those credits would get rolled over month to month. A little bit more on time of use rates. Now, this is really important because even though you might be a tiered customer today, all utility customers in the state of California will be transferred over to time of use rates at some point over the next couple of years. They're doing this in a rolled out fashion, so it could be as early as late 2020, but it could also be 21 and 2022. So it's still TBD, but you know that this is coming, and know that it's going to be more important when you use power, because between the hours of 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. is where peak rates occur. And as you can see from this slide, the summer rates can be up to 40 cents a kilowatt hour between 4 and 9 p.m. And the winter rates are less expensive. But this is important to know because if you're a solar customer and you might be producing extra energy between the hours of 8 a.m. and say 6 p.m. when the sun is shining, and you're overproducing, you'd be sending electricity back into the grid at those rates. And then when you draw from the grid, you'll be pulling from credits at the assigned time periods. So here's sort of a ballpark cost of what a system might be for a condo. So this is a 2 kW system. Again, that's 2,000 watts, which is about 6 to 7 solar panels up on the roof. This size system might be typical for a 1 to 3 bedroom condo that doesn't have any extraordinary electric uses, and maybe the existing condo owners in the first tier, like up to 300 kilowatt hours a month. This size system would cover all or a majority of that usage over the course of the year. We're seeing market prices about $4 per watt of solar, so a gross cost would be about $8,000. There is a federal tax credit available. That's 26% of the gross cost you can receive as a tax credit on your next filing. If you're interested in this, I recommend talking to your tax advisor, let them know your interest, and make sure you get the right forms filled out. You can see over 25 years, the system will generate significant savings, and the IRR and payback are really decent, under 10 years. Just a note, even a larger system, maybe double this size, would still see pretty similar IRR and payback periods. But a lot goes into estimating a system size and the cost. And this would all be done when you start conversations with a solar professional, because they're going to look at the size and complexity of the roof, the materials. They want to look at your energy bills to make sure that they're not oversizing a system. You want to get an appropriate size system. You might also need some panel upgrades or some new equipment installed. So that would all be determined on a site visit. Some of the things that will determine the cost of the make and model of the solar panels, what installation company you work with. There's national chains, there's local. So we always recommend getting multiple bids. And there's also financing available. You can obviously buy up front. There's leasing available, but what's most popular nowadays is actually solar loans because they're pretty low interest. You can go solar with little to no money down and pay back your loan with energy savings. And at the end of the day, you own the system, and you can also claim the tax credit. Now we're getting into the uniqueness of solar on condo buildings. It's really important to assess the existing conditions. How to size is really unique depending if it's townhouse or multi-level condo. I'm going to get into that virtual net metering program I talked about earlier, and then some of the procedures, responsibilities for how to interact with your HOA. So when you're assessing your building's conditions, this is something that the Solar Santa Monica can help you with as well. We're going to want to look at the available space on the roof. And we can do this through satellite imagery, and we could even measure the solar-friendly areas of the roof to size systems. We want to obviously avoid shade, which is the enemy of solar production. So if there's shadows from trees, as you can see in this picture here as an example, we don't want to put solar panels under a shadow. Some tall neighboring buildings might also shade the system, so we'd avoid those. We'd also want to look at the condition of the roof. Solar panels are designed to last for decades. They're warranted for 25 years, no moving parts. When they're up there, they just work. So we want the roof to be in near new or excellent condition before installing solar. You do have the option to remove and replace solar down the line if repairs are needed, and the cost of that is about $1,000 to $2,000 for the labor to do that. So roof condition is important. We would also want to look at, probably during an in-person site visit, is the setup of the electric panels and electric meters. And I'll show you some pictures of those designs. So there are a couple different types of condos that we've identified in Santa Monica. The first is a townhome. This is sort of defined as an owner-occupied unit that is vertical. So the same owner lives on the first floor and the upper floors. And it's pretty straightforward to sort of delineate the roof per unit. And what's also unique about townhomes that make them easier to work with from a solar perspective is oftentimes their electric panel and meter sort of secluded. It is dedicated to that unit. There's separation between those meters. Sometimes there's an underground garage where the panel is. So it makes it easier for the solar installer to interconnect to a townhome. Here's sort of an example of a 5-unit townhome. It's pretty obvious sort of where the 5 units align. And the owners of these units have their dedicated space on the roof, and they have that to work with. So after looking at their bills, they could size a system to meet their needs. For example, here you see maybe this first unit has a larger system because maybe that's a 3-bedroom unit. Usage is a little bit higher. They have a larger system. Unit 2 only has 6 panels. Maybe that's a single occupant. They've got, a lower bill. A smaller system would work for their needs. Multi-level condos are slightly more nuanced and complex because there are different owners on different floors. Maybe there's different size condos ranging from studio to 3-bedroom. And so the roof sort of needs to be mapped out. And this is something, again, that the Solar Santa Monica program can help you with. Because when you're dealing with your HOA, you might be the solo solar champion and want to go solar, but what the HOA requires is a map of the entire roof showing an equitable layout of systems for all the units. And how that is determined might be up to you. Is it 30 equal size areas? Maybe it's more equitable to do it by square footage of the units, so larger units would get a larger portion. Maybe the space could be determined by dues to the HOA. If they pay a higher percentage, they get more on the roof. So this is things that we need to work out. But a nice flat roof like this, here's an example of a solar system installed on a flat roof. This racking system is weighted down by some bricks. There's also attachments to make sure that there's no shifting during a seismic event. Here's just another photo of an apartment building or condo that's really maximized the roof. And likely they're using virtual net metering to assign the benefits of the solar to each of the tenants. As I mentioned before, meters and panels are very unique to every building. As you can imagine, meters like this that are concentrated in one area, it'd be very difficult to interconnect a new solar system to one of the middle rows of meters. So what solar professionals recommend is installing a new meter called a generation meter. So we wouldn't have to deal with the complexity of these meters. So we'll get into generation meters and virtual net metering in just a moment. Another thing to consider is the electric panel, the location and its age. You might live in a newer building where there's enough panel capacity to interconnect solar, but if you live in an older building, it might require some electric panel upgrades. And this would, again, would be determined on a site visit. And on that site visit, we'll determine the appropriate, it's called interconnection strategy. So the first example here is maybe a townhouse example of solar system interconnected to that unit's meter and panel box. The second scenario, which is probably more likely for condos in Santa Monica, with one or multiple owners interested in going solar, but the meter configuration might be too difficult to interconnect to, the solar installer will install a generation meter to track the production of the solar, and then it would be virtually assigned to the condo units through virtual net metering. So this is unique to multifamily buildings. This diagram, I think, explains it really well. As you can see with the solar panels on the roof, there's a conduit going down to the inverter, and then before it goes into the unit's subpanels, it actually just goes straight to a net generation meter. And so this meter allows the utility to track the kilowatt hours that that system produces, and the utility assigns the benefits to each of the units that decide to participate in the solar project. So this example of 4 units, they've chosen to assign 30% of the output of this system to unit D and 20% to the other 3 units, and they've assigned 10% of the output to the common area. So you as a condo owner or a condo building or HOA, if you're interested in virtual net metering, you can assign the output of the system to the units at your agreed upon sort of rate. And working with your HOA, again, another uniqueness of condos. The solar, I'm going to call them solar champions. This is maybe you on the call, you're interested in solar. You have to apply to work with the HOA on the solar project because you have a common area roof, likely. And so to do this, you submit called a solar site survey. This is that layout that I mentioned before, showing equitable use of the roof area among all the owners. They don't have to all go solar now, but you don't mind muting, folks. So yeah, not everyone has to go solar from the onset, but this just shows if there's interest in the future, there's area for that unit. And also showing the placement of your systems, since you're most likely to go forward, as well as an assessment of the roof condition. Because as I mentioned, you want your roof to be in excellent condition. So if it's not near new condition, you as the owner might have the option to sort of resurface the roof under your system only, or maybe this would be an impetus for the HOA to resurface the whole roof, knowing that there's interested owners hoping to go solar. In addition, as a condo owner looking to go solar, you're responsible for maintaining insurance coverage of that system on the community roof. You're responsible for the maintenance, repair, replacement of the common area and its solar system in the future if it has to be removed or when at the end of its useful life. And also responsible for disclosing to a new buyer of your unit of the existence of the system and these responsibilities. And so now I'm going to invite Laureen and Paul to talk about these unique HOA laws and the changes that have made it easier for solar champions like yourself to move forward with this process.
Here. Thank you, Drew. Thank you for that very thorough presentation. That's a lot of information. It makes it seem like solar is really complicated, and in many ways it is an advanced technology. But when I put in solar on my home, it really was pretty easy to do. And the whole point of this gathering today is that things have gotten easier for condominium owners. So we're hoping to jumpstart the process here in Santa Monica to encourage some condominium owners to explore this and get solar installed. The key message is that it can be done. And some of the key changes that have happened are Solar Champion has been, the law is written so that one person in a condo building can push the process forward to get solar. The other key thing I'd like you to focus on is that permission for putting solar on the roof has gotten easier as well. And we'll help you. The point of this is that we'll help you get this process going. So with that in mind, let me bring back Paul DeSantis. Paul, as I mentioned earlier, is a real estate attorney, and he knows the new laws quite well. Paul, tell us a little bit about the changes in the laws, specifically about the authorized use of the roof and the number of people you need now to get to support your quest to get solar in a condo.
Okay, so effective on January 1st, 2018, basically 2 years ago, a little bit more, very, very big change was made by the state legislature, which these two rules overrule any local rule, and they overrule anything that's in the CCNRs that will get in the way. So first one is there, it says Civil Code 4600. This is key, super important, because now the HOA can grant an easement for the use of the roof, and that would then be legally valid and insurable. Now, why is this important? Among other things, it provides financing. And, besides what Drew mentioned of the individual doing it, if the HOA decides, okay, well, we'll let these couple people start, but we want to do it and we'll use some money to do the roof, do it all first class, the HOA can borrow money at a very low rate of interest and just put all this in the HOA dues, because otherwise, basically the building's falling behind. All the new buildings are mandatory to have solar. So 4600 is a key thing, particularly to contractors who previously would just walk away because they couldn't get an insurable title to an easement on the roof. The second big one is 714, 714.1. All right, so this is what Laureen talks about, the solar champion. And really, I think the solar champions are the ones that are going to get this happening. Now, let's say that you're in a 10-unit building and you're just one person and you want solar and the rest don't know, or maybe they're against it. If you prepare an application, which the code spells out exactly what has to be in that application, and there's nothing strange, Drew covered this earlier in the site design, etc. But if you put together the application and you send it to the HOA, by law, the HOA has to respond to you within 45 days. They might come up with something reasonable. But if they don't, after 45 days, your application is automatically approved by law. Automatically approved by law. This is completely different than what we normally see in HOAs, where boards of directors take forever, to do things. Now, remember, I've represented associations and people, for more than 300 projects, so I'm familiar with it. But in this case, this is a reasonable law. It's not trying to jam something in. What they put in that application is are reasonable things, and then they allow the ability to do more. So the bottom line on these very, very critical, dramatic changes that happened on January 1st, 2018, is now the project, due to the easements, getting that something insurable and permanent for contractors to do this, you can do the array on the roof. Secondly, now a solar champion, meaning just one person, can put through their application, and if the HOA does not approve it within 45 days, it's automatically deemed approved. Now, here's the beautiful part about this, though, as I've seen, when you have a solar champion and they're saying, I'm going to do it, and look what I'm going to save, and how I feel it'll improve the value of my unit, and my responsibility to help make a more sustainable world, you get other people interested. And you have, as Drew showed you before, you have all these little spaces on the roof that are designated for other people. So one last point here. So the normal way that would start with, let's say there's only one out of the 10 people, there would be one array on the roof, but a plan for the other 9 to come in when they're ready.
That's wonderful, Paul. Thank you. So this is one of the key aspects of the process, and that is filing an application that opens up the door for other people to get in on the game, if you want to call it that. So we covered that, I believe, in the next slide, Drew.
This one?
Whatever the next
this.
slide was.
This is basically the last slide about taking next steps and
Okay.
how we're going
All
to
right.
support you along the way.
So here we go. So here's how we can help you. Those of you who are interested in establishing solar on your condo. At the end of this webinar, we will send you a survey, and that survey will allow you to give you information that you'll need for an application to move this process forward. We encourage you to communicate with your neighbors and your homeowners association about the project, and there is a PDF flyer, I suppose, that you could give them to learn more. They can even watch this webinar, which will be available online through the Solar Santa Monica website and the Climate Action Santa Monica website. Fill out the checklist that we will provide you. This checklist will help us get an understanding of the physical characteristics of your building, and that will help assess whether or not your structure is suitable for solar. Solar Santa Monica will look at all of these factors and provide an analysis of your particular situation, including energy savings potential. And then we'll schedule a no-touch technical site visit. So this is the part that Sunrun has volunteered to provide in order to jumpstart this process. And during that technical site visit, we'll look at things like the location of the electrical panels and other, I guess, engineering concerns that might promote or limit your ability to establish solar in your building. After that, you procure bids and you get your HOA approval. So we will provide you tools that you need, including some help on getting an application developed for your condominium project. So thank you, Drew. I think you have one or two more slides to share.
Nope, that's it.
Okay, to the Q&A.
As far as our slides go.
Good. So Jabadi has been monitoring the chat. I don't know how we're doing with questions there, Jabadi, but what's come from the audience?
So right now we have 3 questions, and yeah, please feel forward to any questions. We could go in depth on any particular topic, so don't hesitate to send in more questions. But as of right now, we have 3 questions, and we can start going through these right now. The first question that we have is from Melissa Sweeney, and she asks, if I received a quote a decade ago on a solar system on my multi-unit roof, is it worth it to get a new one?
Thank you for that question, Melissa. And absolutely, I think if you got a bid today, the cost would probably be more than halved. It's amazing how quickly the cost of solar went down over the last 10 years. In my professional opinion, I think we probably hit a bottom as far as the cost for the equipment itself and the labor. So I think now is a great time to get another bid. So yeah, great question. And another reason to sort of get a new bid is and do it this year is that tax credit, which is at 26%, and it's going to step down at the beginning of next year. Michael, do you have any follow-up to that?
No, you're right. It steps down at the end of this year. It'll be 22% next year, and then it falls to 10% unless it's extended. So definitely a time to move now. And if you find that you can join with other solar champions and collectively put in a larger system, the cost per watt will probably go down. So it's another reason to talk to your neighbors and move together.
So thank you for asking. So the next question, Karen asks, what if the condo is a historic building or property under the Mills Act? Can the Mills Act prevent the installation of PV units?
The city of Santa Monica has in its planning code some guidance on the placement of solar, like it shouldn't be visible from the street. So I believe as long as the system is placed on the roof that isn't visible from the street, it should be good to go. But I'd be happy to look at your building specifically, and we can touch base.
Thank you for that question. Chris asks, is IRR the same as ROI? So, the financial terms, those acronyms. We could definitely answer that for you.
Michael, do you want to talk about the financial analysis that you prepared?
Yeah, the IRR is technically an annualized rate of return. So it's telling you, what you could expect to have in terms of return on investment every year. The ROI is the aggregate earnings. Like if you put in a solar system for, 8,000 and then you recoup $16,000 of savings, then the ROI would be a much larger figure. Maybe it's like 100% or whatever. So that's technically the difference. One is just giving you an annualized rate, and one is giving you the total rate. But we found with net energy metering, depending on how much energy you use, the return. I mean, the total amount you save over time is you use triple what you spent initially, and we can help you run the figures, especially if we have your use data. We can pretty much predict what your savings will be over 25 years. So, and we're happy to look at that through the Solar Santa Monica program.
Aram asks, what type of insurance do I need, and what are the approximate costs for that insurance?
Well, the project needs insurance. So whether that's just one person in the 10-unit building, in which case it's going to be insurance that solar champion is going to have to figure in. But then if the whole property, let's say all 10 units, are going to, you still need to have some insurance. But there, of course, the cost would be spread, be a lot more economical.
Michael, he also has a question. If I apply for solar with my homeowners association as a solar champion, would I ultimately be the owner of the solar system on the roof? What about the new meter/transformer? Can you address what kind of complications might arise in a situation where I own solar that is fixed onto a common space roof of the HOA?
Well, this is Michael. I'll take the first whack at that. Just is that depending on how many people want to join you, that would determine the nature of the equipment. The conduits might be a little bit bigger. The wire runs have to be organized so they can collect all the energy from the different systems. So there might be a new transformer or service panel needed at the point where the new generation meter would go in, and that would depend on what you're doing immediately and what you want to prepare for in the future. Like if you want to add systems later, you might have to upsize that particular piece of gear. So that can all be determined with a solar contractor. My understanding of the rest is that you do own that asset. It's tied to your unit, and if you sold your unit, that your portion of the asset would go. So it kind of depends on whether or not you're doing virtual net metering, in which you would own some percentage of the system that's up there, and that could be transferred, or if you have your own unit. And perhaps Paul has some other legal aspect to that question.
No, that's a good answer. Basically, let's say you had a building air conditioning that's up on the roof, but it serves your unit. When you sell your unit, that unit, the air conditioning unit on the roof, goes to the new buyer. Same thing here. Whatever you own on the roof is going to go to the new buyer. Now, There's a different situation, and we're talking about the Solar Champion, but if they set it up with the HOA correctly, then there's a lot more benefits. You know, if the HOA is willing to look to the future, that maybe someday other people will come in. So there's a lot of ways to improve on it, but that unit and that benefit goes when you sell your unit.
Paul or Michael, there was this other other piece of the question about complications that might arise about the common space. Any red flags or warnings you want to give people that they should be aware of before they jump in?
Well, if I could jump in first on this and say the whole point of 4600 is to get rid of the legal complications that used to be all over the place. So once you got the project approved and you've got this ability under 4600 to make the easements, you're not going to have a lot of legal complications as time goes on. Now, what was discussed earlier is the roof condition. And that, again, depends how it's done. And, you know, one of the things we haven't talked about so far, but HOAs borrow money at very low rates if they decide to do it. So let's say you've got 5 years left on the roof before you have to replace it. As part of this project, they could put on a whole new roof, and it would be economically better for the association project.
And I'll just jump in to say that the complications would maybe depend on whether it's a flat roof, whether it's has pitched roofs that are angled in a certain direction. For instance, you know, solar is usually put on the southeast to southwest side, not the northeast to northwest side. So if there's condo under a pitched roof, it may be that one side is better, and that side should be divided up between the units. Also, parapet walls would create shading, elevator shaft. So there would be a determination about what is the usable space, and then a discussion about how to divide it up equitably. But that would depend a lot on the site conditions, and the solar contractor and Solar Santa Monica can help you through that.
We now have a question from Paul, and that's asking, how quickly are things changing? Will a system installed now be out of date in a few years?
Do you want me to take that, Drew?
Yeah, sure. You take a first stab at it.
Sure. We find that there are incremental improvements. For instance, inverter efficiency a few years ago was averaging about 96%, and now it's averaging 98%. Those slight gains. Panels are becoming slightly more efficient, and usually if you find a panel that's a bigger wattage, it usually covers a bigger area. But these incremental gains are not, they shouldn't stop you from doing it now. It's not like the electronics world where if you wait a year, everything drops by 50% in price. We're as efficient as we're going to be right now for the foreseeable future, and except for an incremental gain, we don't see any revolutions in equipment just yet. So, Drew?
Yeah, I'll just say, just back to the inverter efficiency, there are even 99% efficient inverters, and those microinverters are probably one of the biggest advancements in the industry, just because they're so easy to install, and you can monitor your system through the internet, which we couldn't do as easily 10 years ago. So the monitoring systems are better, the inverter efficiencies, and again, the panels, they're great today. They were really great 5 years ago. We've just seen incremental improvements, so no reason to wait on that front.
I believe we probably got at this, the answer to this question, but Michael again had asked, or would the HOA have to be the owner since it is on a common rooftop?
This is Michael. No, the HOA could own the system that offsets the common area meters, but the individual units would own the portion of the system that offsets their meter. So it depends on whether the HOA wants to offset common meters or just let the individual owners hold sway. The only thing I can think of in terms of common area or HOA expenses is if, let's say you had two parties interested this year, but maybe 10 more people would like to join in a couple of years. It could be that you oversize some equipment now and the HOA covers that cost to allow other people to join later. But that's a discussion based on all the site specifics, and we can help guide you through that too.
I wanted to add one thing here about understanding what common area is and the association's role in this. So let's go back to the 10-unit building we've been talking about. That roof, technically, from a legal standpoint, that technically is owned 1/10 by every owner in the usual HOA setup. Now, the association has power to do whatever. So even though there's 1/10 here, it doesn't have to get 10 people's agreement, because the HOA has, huge authority to do things in projects without having to get a whole bunch of approvals from anybody. So this is very important, because then if only one person wants to do it, let's say that with the new law, and the other 9 don't, they can still go ahead and the association have to make an easement, which would allow the use of the roof.
And they would move forward
Elliot?
with 1/10. They would move
Okay.
forward with 1/10 of the roof dedicated to their system, and the other 9/10 would be available for future systems.
Yes.
Great. Elliot has a question. What are the different concerns for solar where the panels are not on the roof? That is, if the panels are set up on used land in the condo community, or is that a completely different situation that cannot be addressed here?
Well, that'd be
Well,
ideal. If there's vacant land or carport solar potential, that's a great option for a condo owner or an HOA to pursue solar. There's actually one of those systems in Santa Monica on 4th Street. That the carport roof is common, and they installed a system to meet their common area needs. We don't have much vacant land here in Santa Monica, but if you're out of state, it's definitely viable. And I guess the question would be, is that land common area, common property of the HOA? And if so, I think it'd probably go through the same process.
and I don't know if this would come up, but if it's across the street, if it crosses a street, it might have difficulty. But if it's all on the same parcel and it's all contiguous with the main condo building, it should be fine.
Yeah, it would just have to be physically interconnected to the building's panel or a generation meter. And that can be done through, boring under the ground, having conduit underground, keep it safe.
Chris
Any other
asks,
questions, Shabadi?
yeah, there's still a few. We'll try to, answer all these questions. My homeowners association has a treatment plant that has over $20,000 electric bill annually. We received an estimate that with 21 panels, we could see a 21 to 25%. I'm not sure if this, I would assume KWH reduction. Does that sound reasonable? How does one forecast the KWH increase rate?
Well, if this property is in Santa Monica, you can reach out to us. What we would do is look at your bill. I don't know if this is on a residential rate or a commercial rate, but we can tell you if the KWH reduction corresponds in an equal amount of bill reduction or how it would work, and we can guide you through the particulars. We think that We typically use estimates of maybe 3 to 3.5% annual utility escalation cost. So we kind of factor that in, and we would look at a bid or a proposal to see if it's projecting more than that or less than that. The more they project in terms of utility increases, the more savings they show. But you can get our input on that particular situation if you like. SolarSantaMonica.com.
Yeah, and you'll have an opportunity to follow up with us in the survey that we're going to send after this webinar.
And we can get further in depth on any of these questions again, yeah, after the webinar. So, Aram, I'm not sure if I'm mispronouncing your name. As I'm still unclear about insurance, so we need some sort of specific insurance for the solar system as part of our homeowners association insurance. Does this insurance increase the cost of HOA insurance? Can we also get a solar wall installed?
Well, right now, of course, the whole building is being insured, including the roof. So when you have the solar panels added in, it would be a small increase in the cost because you would be insuring the panels and any strange things that could happen there. So your insurance company would have to extend, the rider that you're going to have the solar systems. And, and back a few years ago, this was all rocket science, but now it's a competitive thing. You can get that insurance. It would cover the equipment that you put on and the possible damage that it could cause.
And there's a question about the solar wall. Would you mind typing in what you mean by that?
I wonder if he's talking about a power wall.
The
Power
battery
wall.
backup or the power wall? Okay, so yeah, so we didn't talk about battery backup. Batteries are popular because they provide backup power if the grid were to go out, and they also enable you to use the solar generation after the sun goes down during those expensive peak rates. Pretty straightforward, a single family installation. Businesses are also installing backup generators or batteries. In a condo, I'd imagine it would be a bit more complex because you need square footage for the batteries, where they're going to go, where they're going to be installed. So determining the battery feasibility would need to be done on a site visit.
And I would just add that where where sometimes the batteries can tap into the solar power from the system, if it was a virtually net metered system, there's no direct connection, so the battery wouldn't have access to the solar power. It would just be able to contribute to your unit, whatever its capacity was to store by itself. It couldn't get new energy from solar.
Yeah, if your unit has a dedicated garage, like in a townhouse scenario, I'd say it's much more feasible.
Next question from Chris, asking how quickly do panels degrade? Which states on the East Coast have favorable regulations, laws, incentives?
Get the degradation answer. Panels degrade, we assume 0.5% a year, and that's typically what's published on the spec sheet of the solar panels themselves. So even in year 20, they should still be producing 90% of their output. And as far as East Coast regulations, not as familiar with those anymore. Michael, you want to take that?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, a lot of it is based on the utility. I don't know if you're talking about the solar performance in like snow climates or eastern latitudes. The amount of solar production you get is related to both your latitude and the amount of rainfall, sunny days that you have in a year. So it would be totally different in California than East Coast, but I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but that's part of an answer.
Yeah, and
And
with respect to other states, there's some resources online where you can find out about policies in other states. The ones that come to mind are the Desire database, that's DSIRE. The other is the Solar Energy Industries Association. They've got a map showing the states and how much solar is installed and links to state by state policy.
And those laws and regulations do differ state by state. It wouldn't be uniform. And also, like Michael said, it's based on the utility territory. Wow. So definitely check out those the databases. I wrote those into the chat window. Wow. Next question that we have is from Karen. Does a condo owner have legal standing to push their HOA to install EV chargers and associated PV panels for common area parking where there is no parking assigned to each condo?
Yeah, so EV charging in common area parking garages is definitely doable. The city of San Monica actually just went through a rebate program offering rebates for multifamily owners to install charging infrastructure. We had over 20 participants in that. So yeah, some of the same concerns or site characteristics with EV charging apply to solar. So yeah, you want to know about the electric meter, the panel capacity, how the EV charger be connected to that panel, conduit runs. And if you said if the parking spots aren't assigned, that's the case. I think if you have interest in your building to assign an EV charging only space, that would be amazing. I think that's something you'd have to take up with your HOA. My colleague Ariana Vito is the city's EV programs coordinator. So again, if you have additional questions about this, we can get you in touch with her. We can provide resources to make this EV charger happen in your building. Jabadi, I know you've done work with some EV charging. Do you have any other comments?
I'm not sure around the legal parameters that could compel the HOA to pursue it specifically. However, EV chargers, there are incentives from the state through CARB, the Air Resources Board, as well as through the our regional local Air Resources Board as well, to fund EV charging, as well as you can derive carbon credits as well that could also help to pay for the price of EV charging as well. So there are, like how we have looked at the tax credits, there are also credits available that can make installing these chargers more financially palatable as well. So that could also be an incentive that that could be looked into to make bring this type of initiative forward to the HOA seem like an idea that'd be more feasible for everyone to buy into.
Very good. And I do know there is some legislation that was enacted, I believe in 2018 or 2019, designed that so HOAs can't prohibit homeowners from installing and using EV chargers. So there are some laws protecting EV drivers.
Yeah, I'm just mentioning.
Maybe Paul has that.
Yeah, Drew said legally you can compel the HOA to go ahead and let you get your EV chargers. Now, there's some problems with a lot of the older buildings because there's not a lot of parking spaces and so on. But definitely the law favors you doing this, and you can make an application to the HOA, which it's similar to what we've just been talking about. They really have to do it.
And this will be our final question. How often does the system need servicing? I've heard that the inverters need expensive replacement every 7 to 10 years. Is that correct? And if so, what are the work and equipment costs to replace the inverter?
Yeah, so solar inverters, some of the older model string or central inverters have a 10-year warranty. That's typical. The microinverters I mentioned come with a 25-year warranty to match the warranties of the solar panels. So that's kind of a nice selling point for those microinverters. If you have an older string or central inverter, you're right that their typical end of life is about 10 years, 7 to 10 years. And if that's the case, then replacement's required. And I think that they cost, depending on the size, because the bigger they are, the more expensive they are. But for a typical, like a 2 kW system that we were talking about before, you can anticipate $700 to $1,000 in equipment replacement costs.
Okay, well, wow, this was really great. Thank you so much. I just want to remind you all that we recorded this session. We hope that you'll share it with friends. And please fill out the survey that you will receive by mail and let us know what you thought about the webinar, but also to get your home or condo moving further with solar so that we can help you get some projects going here. Tell your friends about it. Drew, did I leave anything off of our closing here?
I don't think so. Really appreciate
Okay.
everyone's time, and we'll be sending that survey via email to the folks that registered through Eventbrite.
Check your email and check your spam as well, because it could end up there since it might be a group email.
It might not be today, but hopefully by tomorrow.
In the next, very shortly.
Next couple days.
Let me also ask you to please consider supporting Climate Action Santa Monica. You don't have to send money. Just log on to our website and lend your name, please. We want people to say they are friends of climate action. As we go forward and we talk to people about important steps that need to be taken in our community, your voice matters, and it matters to us to say we have X many thousand members, followers. So please log on to climateactionsantamonica.com. Let me thank Drew for his time, and Paul DeSantis as well. Jabadi, Michael, thank you. Thank you all for attending. We have a few Climate Action Santa Monica volunteers on here that helped make this happen, including Melissa Sweeney and Amy Sullivan. So thank you to you both. And we look forward to hearing from all of you. Thanks again.